Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 650, Fog of Temptation 3. Darkness. Getting pulled into the depths of the water, all Inez felt was darkness. An endless and suffocating darkness. The hands were all over him. They pulled him deeper and deeper into the depths of the water. He tried to reach up to cling to something, but it was useless. There was nothing. The darkness continued to swallow him whole. Come, Inez. You can rest now. There's no need for you to devote yourself to a goddess you might never have seen. It was merely an act to show the benevolence of the goddess to the people in the city. Do you really think they care about you? The guys who took away your organs are probably the same guys who gave them back to you. It's all the same. I know you know. So stop clinging to them. Just let yourself go. The deeper he sank, the louder the voices became. So did the number of hands. They pulled him deeper and deeper into the water. Although Inez had the ability to breathe underwater thanks to his new skill, at that moment he couldn't use it. It was as if the knowledge of it had vanished from his mind entirely. He also forgot how to hold his breath. His mind and thoughts were blank. He didn't know what to do. He felt completely lost and alone. And it was in such a situation that he did the only thing that he knew how to do. He started to pray. O goddess of light, if you're truly there, hear my plea, grant me your aid. Do not let my faith falter. Deliver me from this eternal abyss that seeks to consume me. With his eyes closed, he began to pray to the goddess. Just like in the past, she was going to save him. He believed he'd save her. As such, he stopped resisting. O goddess of light, if you're truly there, hear my plea, grant me your aid. Time passed like this. The cold sank deeper into him, freezing every inch of his body as his consciousness began to fade. And yet Inez continued to cling to the hopes of the goddess saving him from the darkness that swallowed him. She had done it before. He believed in her. Goddess, where are you? As time went on and the darkness closed in around him, Inez felt a growing sense of unease take hold. His goddess. She had yet to answer his prayers. Was he not praying enough? Inez curled himself into a ball as the hands continued to drag him down. O goddess of Lig, HT, if you truly there, hear my, grant me your aid. He wasn't able to say the words properly this time. His consciousness was fading even more. His chest tingled, but he continued to pray. It was all that he knew to do. However, regardless of how much he waited, the goddess never answered his prayer. All he felt was the silence of the world around him. It was quiet and cold. His mind was slowly starting to slip, and in that moment Inez came to a thought. Did the goddess forsake me? Did she forget about him? Were his prayers useless? Was he useless? Were all his actions and devotion for nothing? No. It can't be. She must be busy. I am just. Inez's body was entirely pale now. His face was also pale beyond recognition, and around him the hands had now practically surrounded him from all sides. Inez tried to resist, but he knew it was too late. The hands were too strong and he had no energy in his body. His eyes opened, and for a fleeting moment he caught the redness of the water. Yet again. He found himself swallowed by red. Inez let his body and mind relax in that moment. His drive to continue was slowly slipping away as he let the voices take over. Come, let mom take care of you again. It's just us two again. As it should have been from the start. This was it. There was nothing else he could do. He couldn't continue any further. This was. Within his fading consciousness, something stirred. Is this how you're going to let things play out? An all too familiar voice whispered in his mind. Ah! Inez felt like laughing. Now his voice was also in his head. He shook his head. He'd much rather die hearing the voice of his own mother than his. Are you really going to give up after all the struggle you've gone through? The voice whispered again, and Inez found himself smiling. What would you know? You know nothing about me. Yes, I do not know much about you. However, I've observed enough to know you are someone who never grew up. Ah? Inez almost felt the energy return to him, his eyelids trembling as if trying to open. What the fuck did he know? What the fuck did he know about the struggle he had gone through? About all the sacrifices he made? About his orge? You were never allowed to grow up. Inez paused. The voice continued. You adapted. You became what was necessary in order for you to survive. You read moods, groveled when you needed to, and softened your presence. Inez felt something stir in his chest. He wanted to deny the words but found himself unable to. Why couldn't he deny them? You learn to take care of others before even learning to take care of yourself. Learn to take care of others before learning to care for myself? That's. Inez tried to deny the words again but realized he couldn't. You had no space to be messy. No space to relax. No space to do the things someone of your age is supposed to do. You cling to goals and ambitions not because you want to truly achieve them but because they give you a purpose. A reason to live. The words felt like powerful hammers against Inez's chest as his slowly beating heart started to quicken. Blood flowed once more into his body. You had no childhood and as such, you never grew up. What you thought was your childhood was just you trying to survive. You learned to survive but forgot about everything else that came with survival. Like learning how to rest, learning how to laugh, learning how to cry, learning how to feel anything. You're nothing but a shell of a human driven by the single-minded goal that is disguised as nothing but a reason to live. No, you don't believe in the goddess. Bullshit. You just needed an excuse to cling to your life. Bullshit. Ines started to feel angry. His devotion to the goddess was real. How could he question his devotion? How could he? And there's nothing wrong with that. Eh? What? None of this is really your fault. But it is. Of course, it's my fault. Whose fault would it be but mine? You were never given time to grow up, to understand what it means to take care of yourself, to trust anyone, to ask for help. And as his chest stirred, ask for help? To whom? In this world, who would help me? There's one right before you. The silhouette above him started to become clearer as he bent down to look at Inez. I may not be the friendliest of people, but I do take care of the people that I employ. So, let me help you. Let you help me. Inez felt his chest stir. Help? Was he really allowed to receive help? Someone like him? Splash. The water above him stirred and Inez managed to open his eyes to see a hand reaching out for him from above. It dove deep into the water and towards him. Why could he see the hand? It was so clear and Inez felt his own hand move. He reached towards the outstretched hand and tried to grasp it. Button. That's what I'd like to do, but no. Huh? The hand pulled away the moment he tried to reach for it. If I help you, you just end up repeating the same thing all over again with the goddess. What? I'm not the one who is supposed to help you. You aren't? But didn't you just say it? You're the one who is supposed to help yourself. You can rely on others to help you, but at the same time, you need to learn to help yourself. I could see you immediately close up in the water and pray for your goddess to help you. You've become too reliant on her. I don't want you to become too reliant on me. Focus. His voice was soft. Focus on your thoughts and mind. Focus on everything around you. Anaz's mouth opened, but it soon closed as he tasted the water. It tasted horrible. What is your goal? To help the goddess. Tui. The goddess isn't a goal. It's a means to a goal. But what is your goal? What was his goal? It was to help the goddess. That had been the goal the entire time. But was it really? Was that his goal, or was his real goal something else? Are you forgetting my previous words? What? You need to grow. Stop clinging to things that tie you down. Anaz's chest quivered. Let go of the weights holding you down and allow yourself to grow. Can I really do that? I have no use for someone that is tied down by weights they themselves can't bear. It's time to cut them loose and grow up. Anaz's mind stirred. In that moment, it was as if the entire world around him changed. He was standing before the all-too-familiar merchant. But he looked big in front of his eyes. So damn big. Had he always been this big? No, it's not that he's big. But it's more like. Inez looked at his arms and realized. I'm the small one. Ah. Inez slowly turned his head to meet the merchant's gaze as his hand reached for his head. It's time to grow up. The hand was warm. Warmer than the cold water around him. You didn't have a choice, but now you do, so. Let go. Grow up. For once, let yourself be free. A brief silence ensued shortly after as Inez opened his eyes to reveal a pair of glaring red eyes. There the hand appeared again. And he swatted it away. Without looking back, he pushed himself up. What are you doing? Come back. Inez. The hands behind him tried to bring him down, but as if his entire body was made of water, the hands directly passed through his body before he reached the top and brought himself out of the water, his eyes meeting those of the merchant. And for the first time in a while he saw it. The genuine smile on the merchant's face. Took you long enough. He paused before adding. My assistant. Chapter 651. The Strangeness of Nothing One. The world was silent. As the fog embraced the two figures standing on the surface of the water, a smile soon graced Lazarus's features as he looked at the red-eyed figure before him. Is this your intent? Not bad. It almost felt like a certain someone he once knew. One that was related to blood. But at the same time it felt different. Lazarus had merely caught a glimpse of it. He didn't know exactly what Inez's intent was. Yeah. Looking at his body, Inez raised his head back up to look at the merchant with a complicated expression. His mind felt a lot fresher at this very moment. He couldn't quite explain it, but it was almost as though a mental block that had been weighing him down for a long time had finally been lifted, granting him the ability to form an intent. One that he had been trying to chase for the longest time. Progression doesn't only come from the body. A very important aspect is the mind. Lazarus began to explain as though he understood Inez's thoughts. You can be as talented as you want, but if your mind is not there, you will never be able to progress. This is especially so for things like intent. It's not something you develop just because you want it to. Well, unless you're some sort of freak, but most of the time it comes when your mind reaches a certain state. Lazarus was talking through experience. This was what he had found during the times of the past. Progression didn't just come from the body. The sudden increase in mana, the stronger body, and so on. The mind was an extremely important aspect of progression. The higher one ranked, the more important this aspect was. This was also one of the main reasons why most of the people who reached the highest of ranks were people whose thoughts and emotions were indifferent or cold. Because only such people had firm minds. I see. Taking in the merchant's words, Inez looked at his own hands. He didn't really know how to feel about the situation. A part of him still wanted to worship the goddess, but at the same time, he also understood that the goddess was what was tying him down. He had been so focused on trying to repay her kindness that he had neglected everything else. I still wish to become a luminarch, but he no longer planned on prioritizing it over himself. His mind felt clearer when his thoughts paused there. Yeah, where do you think this fog comes from? Do you think this is something that comes naturally with this strait? Inez's words were cut, but Lazarus, as he looked around with narrowed eyes. His focus was now directed towards the strange fog that surrounded them. This caught Inez in an awkward moment, but he soon snapped out of it and looked around. He wasn't really sure himself. He wasn't all too familiar with the sinful strait. If there's someone you need to ask, then it should be Anne. The merchant stood above the water in silence before eventually nodding his head. Yes, you're right. The best course of action is to leave this place. They had stayed here for long enough. Something about this place felt creepy and, looking around, Lazarus's face turned grim. No matter how much he tried to think about it, he just couldn't see how the fog could have caused one of the seven lords and his crew to die like this. Something about the fog felt extremely unsettling. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but this was definitely no regular fog. It was plop, plop. A sudden bubbling sound echoed, and Inez's and Lazarus's heads snapped in the direction of the bubbling sound. Inez's eyes grew a deeper shade of red as he looked towards the bubbling with deep apprehension, his entire body tensing. Lazarus was different. He wasn't planning on waiting to see what the bubbling was. Looking up and listening to Pebble whisper in his mind, Lazarus nudged Inez with his arm and bolted towards the entrance of the strait. Leave now. His voice was firm, and Inez snapped out of it. He followed right behind Lazarus as the two quickly rushed forward. How does he know the way? He isn't even crashing against the sides of the cliffs. As they ran, Inez couldn't help but marvel at the merchant's skills. Unlike him, who had previously struggled to gain his bearings, the merchant moved in a way that made it seem like he was completely unaffected by the fog. We're almost there. Lazarus's eyes narrowed as he looked into the distance. He could hear the faint, muffled sound of the water crashing against the rock surface. He knew that they were close to reaching the exit. Just a little more. Just a little. Both Lazarus and Inez froze, their bodies locking in place. Boom! Boom! The deafening sound of the water crashing violently against the jagged rocks echoed, reverberating through the air with an intensity that rattled their bones. It was so close. Closer than they realized. Yet, they couldn't move. It wasn't just hesitation. It was as if their very wills were shackled. Their muscles refused to obey. Their eyes were frozen, wide and shaky as they were transfixed by the enormous eye that had materialized from the depths of the fog. It was massive, its bloodshot iris seething with an unnatural glow that pierced through them, as though it could see into the very core of their souls. And in that moment nothing else existed. No thoughts, no sounds, no escape, just the suffocating weight of that gaze. At the same time, not far from them. They're taking quite a while. I wonder what's taking them so long. Anne's brows were knit tightly as she looked towards the distance where the little assistant and the strange merchant had left. It had been almost 2 hours since they had left, and she had yet to hear any news of them. This was a little worrying, considering that all they had to do was check out the situation and come back. Maybe they've found something and are investigating? This was most likely what had happened. She wasn't too worried about their safety, especially not when the merchant was present. He was strong. So strong that even she felt slightly apprehensive when staring at him. Although his physical body wasn't strong, his mind was. Not only that, but he also appeared to have several extremely powerful companions with him. He wasn't someone she could lightly provoke. And that was the reason she wasn't worried. If something really did happen to him, I'm sure he'll have enough time to use the flare. So long as he shot the flare that she had given him, then she'd start moving immediately and help the two out. However, the flare never really showed up. And soon, she saw the faint silhouettes of 2 figures appearing from a distance. It's them. Her eyes squinted to get a better look, and it was indeed them. The two looked relatively unharmed, with both of their expressions calm. Eventually, they arrived at the bottom of the ship and greeted them. So, how did it go? There's nothing much. It's all clear. And as answered her from below, his expression relaxed. Nothing? And was surprised to hear this. If there was nothing, then what took them so long? It's because there was nothing that it took us so long. Anaz continued as though he could read her mind. We thought that the situation was strange, and so we dug around every nook and cranny of the place in hopes of finding something. But, he shrugged. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Then what about from above? If there was nothing below then? Also nothing. Lazarus was the one to reply this time. He was wearing a complicated expression while thinking about the strait. The moment they entered, they found nothing unusual. There were no ambushes. Nothing. It was just a clear and unobstructed strait. Even with mana sense and everything, he felt nothing. This in itself felt extremely odd, however. After carefully searching through every nook and cranny of the place, there was no denying the fact that there was truly nothing. In that sense, we should be clear to go. Both Lazarus and the little assistant hopped onto the ship with a single jump. He then tossed the flare to Anne, here, catching it, and looked at the two of them in confusion. Did they really not find anything? She had a hard time believing them. However, seeing nothing abnormal with their eyes or minds, she eventually gave the signal to her crew, and the ship started to sail forward. Boom! Boom! The booming sound of the waves reached her ears shortly after as the ship neared the strait. Staring at it and felt her heart grow heavy, however, she resisted and had the ship continue forward, eventually passing the entrance and entering the quiet strait. So far, nothing. It's just like the two of them said. The strait wasn't very long. At their current speed they were moving, it would take about an hour for them to cross it in its entirety. The entire time, and felt nervous as the ship moved forward. She wasn't the only one, as her crew showed signs of nervousness as they navigated the narrow passage. The only ones who looked normal were Anaz and the merchant, who looked ahead with calm looks. They had already explored the place, so they were confident that they wouldn't encounter anything. And indeed they didn't. An hour after entering, they soon spotted the end of the strait as the ship casually moved out of it. It's really that easy? Looking back at the strait with an incredulous expression, and touched her face several times to make sure that this was real. It's really as they said. There was nothing. No ambushes of the sort, not even strange monsters. This felt extremely odd to her, considering how this was the perfect place to ambush them. Could it be that the temple hasn't put out a bounty on us? I doubt it, Lazarus replied, his arms resting against the armrail of the ship. Looking towards the distance as his clothes and hair fluttered, he mumbled, maybe they decided the risk wasn't worth the reward, or perhaps they simply didn't have enough time to set up an ambush. Either way, I doubt they won't come. Perhaps they were just scouting us for a better understanding of how to deal with us. Lazarus had all sorts of thoughts regarding the situation. He also didn't believe things were as easy as they seemed to be. He wholly believed that this was merely the prelude of what was yet to come. But, even as several days passed, their path was completely unobstructed. Not a single ship neared them the entire time. Could it be that the temple had really not set up a bounty? Otherwise, why was their journey so smooth? Chapter 652. The Strangeness of Nothing 2. Chapter 652. The Strangeness of Nothing 2. Clank. Sparks flew in the air as a sword clashed against a rough, spiky surface. Skirting back, a gray-eyed figure panted heavily as he stared at the massive creature standing before him. Watch out! As a scream echoed from right behind him, as though he had eyes at the back of his head, Leon's body blurred and faded from the spot. Bang! Dust exploded into the air as the ground trembled beneath the impact. Cracks spiderwebbed out from the point of contact, and shards of stone jutted up like broken teeth around the crater's rim. The ball itself, covered in jagged spikes the size of swords, hummed with a low, ominous sound. A silence fell over the field. Appearing not far, Leon looked at the massive armored creature and drew a cold breath. This really is no joke. The moment they entered the red zone, they immediately encountered several terror-ranked creatures. Leon had lost count of the number of terror-ranked creatures he had fought, with this one adding to the total number. Leon took a deep breath, his gaze scanning the surroundings. Dead trees cluttered the landscape around him, their twisted limbs casting long, brittle shadows. The ground beneath his feet was dry and cracked, parched by the heat coming from the pale white sun that blazed in a cloudless sky. Like an oven, the air seemed to shimmer under the intense heat. With the trees so densely packed, it was hard to move and see much into the distance. Thankfully, Leon wasn't supposed to duke it out by himself. He wasn't alone. Show! All of a sudden, emerging from deep within the forest were numerous swords as they shot into the air. They hovered in place, humming ominously as they slowly turned to point toward the armored monster. Then, without warning, they burst into flames. Roar! The monster roared at the sight of the swords, but before it could even react, the ground beneath it turned pitch black as several hands emerged from beneath, grasping onto its legs. A massive purple magic circle formed right above the monster as it sealed it in place. Ho! Leon looked at the sight above him with a wry smile. He could feel every hair on his body raise at the sight presented before him. I don't think I'll survive this one. To make matters worse, several other attacks started to form right above the monster, and Leon, who was standing not far from it, suddenly felt the pressure grow on him. Follow new episodes on the N0vel1st.c0m. Thankfully, the space behind him wiggled as a white hair figure appeared and grasped his body, pulling him into the shadows. Leon's vision grew dark shortly after that. And then, bang! The world trembled. It was as if an earthquake had suddenly erupted. The ground split open with a thunderous crack, trees splintered and toppled, and thick clouds of dust billowed into the air. The monster wasn't even given enough time to let out a whimper before it was suddenly killed. By the time Leon emerged from the darkness, he felt at a complete loss. All he saw was a pile of flesh. He wasn't even sure there was anything left of it. Wow, that was easy. Aoife emerged from the distance, her silhouette framed by the settling dust. A small little girl walked next to her, a lollipop in hand, as she looked at her surroundings with disinterest. Swoosh! The scattered swords slowly rose from the ground and drifted toward Aoife, aligning themselves before sheathing smoothly across her back. The swords numbered in the hundreds, and yet, they all fit snugly in her sheath. It was a sight that made Leon's mind pause for a moment until he eventually shook his head. She's rich. This sort of artifact shouldn't be strange. He then looked towards the distance, where he saw Evelyn appear. Her face was a little pale, but she was otherwise doing fine. Her attack was the strongest out of all the ones that had been aimed at the monster. It was only natural for her to be tired. Several other cadets emerged from the woods shortly after, as they all looked at the monster with complex expressions. Normally, this would be enough for us to graduate, but I guess this year is different. Aoife scratched the back of her head while reaching out for Teresa's head. Smack! Ow! Only for it to be smacked away by the little girl. What the hell is your problem? Aoife glared at the little girl who pouted. What am I supposed to do? There's no signal here. How am I supposed to let you watch Justice Man? You took what's mine. No, what? Humph! This girl. Leon awkwardly scratched the side of his face while staring at the two before settling his gaze over to Kira as she looked towards the distance. Matching her line of sight, he saw several explosions in the distance. Looks like they're also fighting a terror-ranked monster. The expedition was divided into two teams. Each time went to different areas to hunt. Their base camp was located not far from where they were. The goal in their hunt was to find themselves some food and resources. The monsters not only provided with good meat, but they were also provided with great equipment. Their hide could be used for covers and roofs, while their bones could be used to create the structures of their makeshift houses. This was how things were supposed to go, but they miserably failed. Looking at what remained of the monster, Leon sighed. If it had a bone, I doubt it'll be intact. He felt his heart ache at the thought. However, in the end, he could only shake his head as he moved towards the monster and searched through whatever was left of it. As he did, the others began scouting their surroundings in search of any monster. Over the past several days, they had grown more and more adept at working together. Having been ambushed more times than they could count, and almost dying several times, this was to be expected. Unlike before, they now moved as one seamless team. It was a gratifying sight to see. A pair of black eyes stared at the group in the distance. She stood suspended in the air, her presence melding seamlessly with the world around her. Her black hair swayed softly, and her eyes blinked lazily before she pulled out a notepad and began jotting down a few thoughts. In general, Delilah was satisfied with what she was seeing. The growth the cadets had shown over the past few days was good. They were now a lot more alert and could work together without any problem. There also didn't seem to be any collaboration issues, with the relationship between the cadets quite good. This was different from the previous years, where groups and cliques always formed. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why this sort of graduation trial was acceptable. If the previous years had gone on, the number of casualties would be massive. Even though Delilah was present, she didn't plan on interfering with things unless a monster way beyond what they could handle appeared. Furthermore, she had a different goal by being here. Thwop! A crow appeared by Delilah's shoulder. Delilah's gaze remained unmoved as the crow appeared. So, have you found anything? The crow didn't answer immediately, prompting Delilah to frown. However, after a short while, The crow retrieved a red leaf from out of thin air and presented it to Delilah. Yes, I found this. Not far from here. This is? It appears to belong to a destroyer-ranked creature. Delilah's eyes narrowed. Destroyer rank. That would indeed be a little problematic for the cadets to handle. Perhaps it was best if she got rid of it before it got to the cadets. However, this wasn't exactly what she was looking for. I feel a familiar energy from it. Ugh. Delilah's eyes jumped up the moment she heard the crow's words. Familiar energy? Her heart, which had been unmoved for so long, suddenly skipped a beat. Why do you say that? Whose energy? It's the same energy as the dragon that belonged to the human. Delilah's heart jumped out again. She tried to maintain her cold and indifferent expression, but that wasn't something she could do. Is this true? Yes, I'm sure. But it's strange. What is? Delilah's tone slowed down. I feel that there is something odd about the leaf. It's almost like it was purposely placed there. Eh? Purposely placed there? Yes. The crow's eyes narrowed as it looked at the leaf. Purposely, as if it wanted to be found out. Delilah parted her lips to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She closed her mouth, biting her lip instead. Struggling to contain the surge of emotion, she drew a quiet breath, and slowly, her expression settled back into its usual calm. I see. She was trying. Really trying her best to keep herself composed. However, staring at the leaf and hearing the crow's words, she couldn't help but think, purpose? For who? Her hands tingled, and her lip quivered, but after taking a single breath, she stopped herself from jumping to conclusions as her eyes clouded. Eventually, her figure faded. By the time she appeared again, she found herself standing in front of an empty spot where several leaves appeared. Pressing her finger against the ground and closing her eyes, she tried to feel the residual mana in the air. She stood like that for several seconds until her eyes opened. And when they did, her expression changed. A pain she thought she had forgotten resurfaced in her chest as she clenched the hand holding onto the leaf. She had merely suspected. One could even say she had deluded herself into thinking that he was still alive. But there was no denying this. He was truly alive, and the fact hurt her just as much as it relieved her. Why did you not come to me? It's my fault, isn't it? At the same time, splash, splash. The boat rocked back and forth, the waves crashing against the bow of the ship. As the boat swayed from left to right, a certain figure calmly walked towards his room as he closed the door behind him. Slowly removing his clothes and wiping his wet hair, Lazarus got a spare change of clothes. The entire time, a frown marred his features. This was something that he couldn't help. Everything had been going a little too smoothly for them. This was supposed to be a good thing, but the peacefulness made everything eerie and abnormal. Felt too unnatural. As if something was interfering with his journey. Someone powerful. Could I be overthinking things? This could very well be the truth, but Lazarus had experienced enough to know there wasn't such a thing as overthinking. If his gut feeling told him something was wrong, then there was a high chance that something was wrong. But what? What exactly could be happening? Slowly turning his body to stare at the mirror by the side of the room, Lazarus's face changed abruptly. What sort of? He took a step back, his face changing as he blinked his eyes to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Tired. He could be tired. There was no way. But yet again he saw the same thing. His lack of reflection. Chapter 653. Remnant South 1. What? Lazarus looked at the mirror before him, his thoughts frozen. Raising his hand, he hoped to see something, but he was shocked to see that the mirror before him remained reflectionless. What sort of? Licking his lips, Lazarus turned his attention elsewhere. He moved towards the bathroom to check the mirror there. But here too, the bathroom mirror similarly lacked a reflection. Shah! He turned on the tap water and closed the sink, hoping to see some sort of reflection in the water, but that also brought no result. His reflection, it was completely gone. How does this make any sense at all? Lazarus extended his hand, and a black cat appeared over his shoulder, staring intently at the water. Pebble, did you notice anything these past few days? Did something happen to me? No. Even Pebble looked confused as an owl materialized from out of thin air. Fwop. I've also not noticed anything. Even you. Almighty was extremely perceptive as a mind-type monster. For even Almighty to be unable to detect a single thing, the situation might be a lot more serious than I originally anticipated. Lazarus's face grew grim as he stared at the mirror and the water. No matter how much he tried, his reflection would simply not return. It was gone. Since when? Could it be since I've returned from the strait? But I don't recall anything happening there. The most sensible option would be to ask Anaz and see if he had experienced any changes. However, just as he was about to do so, a crab appeared from behind his shoulder. It stared at the water for a few seconds before mumbling, "How strange." Lazarus's eyes jumped up at the sight of the crab. He was still not used to seeing the crab. Following the incident back in the temple and bringing the crab over to the ship, the crab, or more like Coral, decided to remain with them for the time being. Something about it not being fully recovered from the incident, and being too far from its previous home. Several months had passed since then. Surely it had recovered. Not that I'm complaining, since it's quite useful. More than anything, he also found its name particularly strange. Wobbles, was it? He didn't really get it, but it was something that had given itself, so he could only accept it. What terrible naming sense. Did you notice anything? Lazarus asked as he stared at the crab. No. The crab shook its body. This is the first time I'm seeing such a phenomenon. However, it does appear to be something that has occurred recently. And, moving further up my shoulder, Wobbles waved its hand on the water as its reflection was similarly gone. I also seemed to be affected by it. What? It was true. The only ones that appeared in the mirror were Pebble and Almighty. Wobbles and I were both missing. But how? I believe this has something to do with what happened at the temple. I licked my lips. But I could see my reflection until lately. The same goes for me, but I didn't go with you during your recent expedition. This could more likely be an aggravation of what had previously happened to us. You're right. The crab's words had merit to them. But then, what exactly was going on? Why was he missing his own reflection, and what exactly happened in the temple? I am of the belief that the rumors from before weren't wrong. We have indeed been targeted by the great primordial one. What? It was as if the very breath had been sucked away from Lazarus's lungs. He opened his mouth to shake away the possibility, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't. His mind raced as the description of the great primordial one flashed in his mind. However, he blinked his eyes slowly. Why can't I remember? Lazarus's brows furrowed as he tried to recall the information he had read regarding the great primordial one. He could remember the most basic information, about where it resided, what it was, but at the same time, he seemed to have forgotten about several other key aspects. Wait, what? Lazarus felt his chest tighten as a possibility occurred to him, and he tapped on his ring, retrieving a certain book. Exe Rule, the one who rests beneath. He remembered distinctly reading this book before, and as his fingers flipped through the pages, they eventually fell onto a certain page. Those who crossed paths with Exe Rule found themselves unable to recall its form, as though every trace of its appearance had been erased from their minds. It was as if they'd never encountered it at all. Only much later did the truth begin to surface. But by then it was already too late. Lazarus's face tensed upon reading the passage. All of a sudden, everything started to make sense to him. The entire time, I had been under its influence. While he was already aware of the possibility, it never truly dawned on him. Mainly, because he had forgotten about such a key piece of information. It was as though it had been stripped from his mind. That was why the thought never crossed his mind. When it did, the notion of such a strong creature targeting him made no sense, and while things did seem a little off back then, he didn't notice too much. His memories of the incident had all been wiped out. But it became clear to him now. Something had happened during the temple, and it had most likely come as a result of Silas's actions. He must be the one behind everything. Lazarus was still unsure of the motivations that Silas had in doing all of this, but he knew that he was planning something. And it wasn't anything small. I must inform the others of the situation. Lazarus wasn't the only one who had been affected on that day. Anaz and N had also been affected. They were all marked. Lazarus didn't waste a single moment and immediately moved out of his cabin, rushing up towards where the dock was located. As the bright light from the white sun pierced through his eyes, and the long gray-white sky appeared, Lazarus saw another figure rushing out. Anaz, as if sensing his gaze, Anaz turned his head, his face pale. Seeing his expression, Lazarus understood. He must have also taken notice of the situation. Anaz opened his mouth to say something, but Lazarus stopped him. Don't worry, I understand. I've also noticed the situation. Let's go talk with and about the situation. I'm also starting to realize why we didn't notice any of the 7 lords on our journey. It wasn't as though the bounty had never been placed. Far from it. It was mainly because those that came their way had most likely been disposed of or never made it to them. They were Exe Rule's prey. Nobody but it could touch us. The thought made Lazarus's body tense as he hastily looked around before spotting and standing by the bow of the ship. She looked lost in thought, her hair fluttering as she looked towards the distance. Lazarus and Inez didn't waste a second as they moved towards her. However, just as they did, and turned her head to face their direction. "We've arrived." "Huh? What?" And stepped to the side, and it was then that the two of them noticed it. The massive shadow that loomed in the distance and stretched throughout their entire vision. "We've reached the remnant south." At the same time, "Did any of you manage to get anything?" "Well." Leon scratched the back of his head with an embarrassed look. Looking at Amel, he didn't really know how to answer. "I mean, we did manage to get something, but..." "Here." Thud. Kira tossed a black piece of charcoal onto the ground, prompting Amel to stare at it speechlessly. "This is whatever is left of what we managed to get." "Wah!" Amel glanced at Leon, who quickly turned his head away. Leon had no words. None that would make a difference, anyway. All he could do was fix his gaze on the surroundings, feigning indifference, as if distancing himself could somehow erase his presence from the moment. "How many times does this make it?" Amel looked at the charcoal piece before sighing. He had long given up on expecting anything from Leon's group. They always came back with pieces like this. Thankfully, the monsters his group managed to hunt were enough to feed everyone present. Amel looked towards the makeshift camp they were in. Tents were set up all over, while a large campfire stood in the middle. Overall, the situation had stabilized quite a bit since their first days in the red zone. Although it was still far from great, it was manageable. They were now able to get some proper sleep without needing to worry about getting ambushed every single second. The tensions were also a lot lower, with everyone more relaxed and adept to their surroundings. If things keep going, this might just end up being a breeze. Amel really thought things would proceed like this, but he ended up jinxing himself too early. "Pack up your stuff." "What?" Staring at Caius, who looked at everyone without much of an expression. Amel and the others looked at him in confusion. But before anyone could voice out their concerns, Caius spoke. "We can't stay in the same place for too long. It'll make us prime targets for the monsters. We need to keep moving every 2 days." "But this is the most basic information that we learn in our empire. I'm sure everyone here has also learned it in the academy." Although his words were met with quite a lot of protests, in the end he wasn't wrong. Everyone was somewhat aware of it, and all they could do was pack up their staff and leave. "Where should we go?" As they started to wonder about their next location, a figure appeared right above them, her hair fluttering. "Huh? Chancellor? Why are you?" The moment Delilah appeared, everyone grew tense. Why was she here? Although they knew that she was supposed to accompany them, she wasn't supposed to appear unless a large threat appeared. Could it be? "Don't worry." Delilah landed softly onto the ground while staring in a certain direction. "Since you're moving, I'll decide the next location for all of you." Her hand reached towards the space in front of her. And then, Re-I-Thriap, under the watchful eyes of everyone present, the very fabric of space before her ripped apart as she pulled it with her bare hands. The cadets could only stare at the scene in shock as a portal appeared before them. "Go!" Delilah nudged them with her head. "The next part of your trial is here." If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.